Shufti Pro. True identity builds trust.
Again with another webinar. Also want to remind you that if you want to listen to our previous webinars, just subscribe to our channel. You may find the link pinned in the chat section. This webinar is a special one. We are very excited to have with us Konstantine Boyko, the CEO of Just Coded, a software company building products for the crowdfunding industry. Their product Lenderkit is a flexible crowdfunding software which has already helped lots of businesses all over the world launch their own crowdfunding platforms. So hi Konstantine, and how are you doing?
Hi Anna, and nice to see you. Thanks for having me here. Let's make it productive.
Sure. Basically, this webinar revolves around crowdfunding, and we will be discussing the industry in particular and how it requires the use of efficient KYC as well as AML services, as there is some gaps and that potentially may allow frauds or PEPs to exploit this industry. Also want to tell everyone that we will be taking live questions, so if there is something you'd like to ask, please type the questions in the chat box. We will answer them in the end of the session. Alright, so let me share with you the agenda of today's discussion. We will be talking about the current state of crowdfunding industry, about how crowdfunding platforms comply with rules. We will be speaking about KYC in crowdfunding and how it works, threats and challenges in the industry, and after all, we will speak about the KYC providers within this industry. Okay, so let's begin. Now every region, as you know, have their own specific regulations for the crowdfunding industry. So for the USA, for the EU, for MENA, for all these regions, they all have separate preferences regarding the industry. And in the US, SEC or the Securities Exchange Commission of the US have recently updated their regulations as well. So for us to understand those regulations, we must at first understand how the industry itself actually operates, which basically brings me to my first question to you, Konstantine. If you were to describe crowdfunding, how would it be for a startup enthusiast, for example, who might be listening to us right now? How would you describe the entire thing?
Okay, so that's a question which one alone can take the whole webinar, of course, but I'll try to keep it fairly short. So first of all, there are many types of crowdfunding, and people, when they hear of crowdfunding, they usually think about something like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, basically websites where you can create a campaign about your product, maybe future product, about some cause. It could be even a movie or supporting somebody of the disaster or whatever. And then people all over the world, they can contribute to your campaign with some money, starting from maybe $1. And there is also some funding target, which if it is reached, then the campaign is considered successful and the money goes to the fundraiser. But in some cases, it's purely donation, so people just donate their money and contribute them to a product or to a company. In other cases, it's what we call reward-based crowdfunding. It means that in exchange to their donation, people get something in return. Usually, it's either a sample of the product or maybe the future product. So let's say you are trying to create some very innovative device, and in order to actually build it, you need to get some funding. So you get that funding with crowdfunding, and then when you actually release the product, those people who support it, they receive the product first before everyone else can try it. But that's very kind of basic, and maybe the most basic version of crowdfunding, where it's one way, so you only investors, or not really investors, but supporters, they send money to fundraiser. And more sophisticated way of crowdfunding, which is actually what we call crowd investing, is two-way. So you don't just support somebody, but you also invest money and expect some return. In some cases, it's debt-based, so you put your money in and then you get your money back with some interest after a set term, well, let's say 12 months. In other cases, it's equity, so you don't expect to get the exact money back, but you get shares in the company. And that's what actually in the US is called regulation crowdfunding. It's equity crowdfunding for startups. And the main example would be in the US, it's Start Engine, for example. In the UK, it's Cedars, you might have heard of, or Crowdcube. They are very similar. They even were going to merge at some point, but that didn't happen. So that's the crowdfunding, which is more about investing rather than just supporting somebody. But at the same time, it's not purely about money usually, because there are like other ways to put your money in, get some return, either with bonds or more traditional assets like stock. But the motivation for people to invest in crowdfunding, it's more emotional. So you know what kind of company you support, if it resonates with your beliefs, how does it make you feel, and so forth. So but in the same time, it becomes kind of new asset class.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of very short introduction to the industry.
But this is it's a very good explanation, I would say. And I also wanted to ask something, more numbers related. There is some changes in the industry. So starting with March 15th, 2021, there is a change in amount offering. So it's like $5 million in a 12-month period. So do you believe that this regulation opens new doors for money laundering, or how are the regulations planning to develop investor verification criteria for crowdfunding in this regard?
I believe you're talking about the US specifically, where the limit has been increased from 1 million to 5 million recently. Well, I think that it doesn't really create like new doors. It just makes the existing doors a little bit wider. So if you have a way of laundering money right now with not right now, but if you had this way before with 1 million, with 5 million, it's just 5 times faster in a way. And and I also wanted to ask you the same question in a way, does it make any difference from KYC perspective to do identity checks and AML checks with 1 million limit and with 5?
Yeah, well, my answer would be pretty much similar to yours. Pretty much the KYC in itself is not really impacted by the changes in this limit. But of course, it's mostly concerned with the checking if the person has been on the red list or not. However, from the anti-money laundering perspective, there might be some slight changes, mostly, in the way we are performing enhanced due diligence and more detailed background checks. So, in simple terms, there is no change in requirements for AML and KYC. But there is more, actions in due diligence checking for investors. But
so I guess it's
go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that it's probably not really change for us technology companies, but more for lawyers and and also very important to remember, it's only about the US. So this, as it's regulated in the US in this way right now. All right, moving forward, another question that I have to you, and I'm sure a lot of other people have the same question in their head. How does one just apply for crowdfunding? How does this system work? Can you share with us a bit more about that? Well, it's simple on one hand, but not so simple when it comes to details. So all of those first of all, it actually depends on what kind of platform you apply to. And before even applying, you probably, if I was somebody fundraising, I would carefully choose which website, which platform to go, because there are general platforms like, again, Seedrs, Crowdcube, or Start Engine, or whatever, where every startup can apply. But there are very niche and specialist ones. So let's say you have a green energy startup, then it makes sense to find a platform which is specialized in this green energy sector, and it might be more productive and maybe more optimal to apply there. Then what comes next after you selected your platform? Again, every platform has their own way of onboarding fundraisers as well as investors, actually. But in any case, first of all, you have to apply for the platform. They have usually certain due diligence process. It could be automated, it could be manual. I think in most cases it's still at least half manual, because they have to make sure that the opportunities they present on the platforms is a valid opportunity, and there are no, at least they manage somehow the risks. Yes, obviously AML policy should have, and AML checks should be applied at this stage, either manually or automatically. And I guess that's pretty much it. But what I was talking,
yeah.
Sorry.
Better automatically.
Yeah. But what I was trying to say earlier about simple and not simple, it's only first step. And then when you create your actual campaign, you have to market it, and you have to design it, first of all, in a way which is appealing to potential investors. Because, as I said earlier, it's pretty much emotional investment. So people should build you should build some trust with people who potentially can invest in the offering, or in your company, or in your project, whatever you have there.
Yep. That makes sense. And also I feel that we are, slightly going towards the regulation questions. So in this regard, how important you think it is to have the crowdfunding as an industry regulated? And on that note, I would like to also understand how secure crowdfunding platforms generally are. Like we've heard it in the past about the idea thieves. So what are the threats that the industry faces from this point of view?
Okay, well, when we talk about security, I think it's two-sided in a way. First of all, there is security from IT perspective, like how secure the platform is in terms of data management, user information, and so forth. And that pretty much comes to platform technology provider or in-house development team. Like, do they follow certain protocols for security? Do they have enough testing, penetration testing, and so forth? On the other hand, what you mentioned about idea thieves, I guess you're talking about somebody seeing something on your campaign and trying to do the same. If that's the case, then I guess the fundraisers, you always have different options, not just crowdfunding, but the traditional ways of financing. If your idea is so sensitive that you can't disclose like anything about it, then I guess crowdfunding is just not the right choice, because it's probably better to go to a venture capital fund or angel investors, sign an NDA with them, and then present the idea, because crowdfunding is more a public way to get funds, and you need to market it, you need to present yourself and show that your idea is credible and investable enough.
All right.
And coming back, I think I didn't answer about regulations. I think it is important for sure to have the industry regulated, and it is very much different from regulation standpoint in different countries. And it also correlates how regulated the certain country with the state of the market. So if we take, for example, US as a country, as a market, there are quite strict regulations, but at the same time there are a lot of platforms on the market. So the market is already developed in a way. There is still room for new players and new platforms, of course, but there are successful cases, big players like Start Engine again. The same happens in the UK. There are big players, there are a lot of platforms overall. The market is kind of developed, and there is quite strict regulating. What happens in European Union is that in every country, the authorities, they have very different rules. And until recently, actually until November 10th this year, when there will be new pan-European regulations coming into play, it was quite difficult to operate cross-border, meaning that if you have a platform in Germany, for example, and you want to get investors or fundraisers in Spain, that would require for you to do quite a lot of legal stuff in both countries. What will change in November, you will have a way to do it in the whole European Union area, European Economic Area, let's say. And so you don't have to, if you register in one country, you will not have to register again in another country where you want to operate. Then, what we see right now with the market is that there are so many platforms in European Union in every country, just because the market is so saturated. But they are very small in most cases. And with new regulations, what we expect is that either some of them will merge or some will just disappear, and new, bigger ones will be created.
All right. Cool. Yeah, did I interrupt you?
No. Well, what I also want and I can add here is that in other regions like MENA, for example, or Asia, there are the market is not developed and the regulations are not ready in most countries, but they are getting there. What we see from our own experience, our own marketing, we get quite a lot of interest from pretty much like from any country in the world, from African countries, from South America, Asia, and so forth. People want to start new platforms. People want to start crowdfunding platforms there, but in many cases it's quite difficult because they don't know the rules. They don't know how to do it properly, so they don't get in trouble from legal standpoint. So it's easier in a way when there are strict rules. On one hand, it makes you comply with them. On the other hand, it's easier because people know how to play and what the limitations are.
Okay, cool. Thank you for your expertise. Now my question is, how do you guys in Lenderkit, come in all of this, how you're handling of the described issues and so on?
Well, Lenderkit is software, first of all, so we're not a platform ourselves. We provide our software to platforms, and we try to be as flexible as possible, in the sense that in any country, in any regulatory environment, we can customize our software in that way, which is compliant to their unique regulations. And that might include different integrations. So, for example, if speaking of KYC, for example, right? So if a certain country requires very specific KYC rules or KYC, there are certain requirements which are not fulfilled by default, then we can create as many integrations as we need. And also, I know that you guys at ShuftiPro are quite flexible in order to adjust into certain regulations and certain rules. So that also helps on your end. But from our perspective, we are in a way, so we don't tie ourselves to a specific market. So we try to be as customizable as possible.
Okay, cool. Okay, and also another question is more technological. I mean, speaking of automation, it used to be some, just process, but now it's a requirement for many industries. The automated fintech solution providers have had an impact on that. So how would you describe this impact, and has this helped you scaling up the Lenderkit in particular, but overall how the industry in general is reacting towards these changes? We received quite some questions while we were having this technicality, so we will have a lot of things to discuss after we finish our discussion. Just to remind you, I was asking about the automation, the impact of it, and how if it helped your company scaling up, and how the industry in general reacted to automating of the processes.
Yeah, so crowdfunding in itself, it's a digital tool in a way. So it's supposed to be automated in most cases by design. In a way, what happens in the past couple of years, maybe because of pandemic, I think it somehow touches like every industry. Many processes became more remote than they were in a way. So if earlier it was possible to do some due diligence offline, then now preferably it should be all done online. And of course it requires to create more automations, more integrations, and so forth. From our perspective, again, this comes to flexibility and also being able to integrate any solution for, let's say, a more automated onboarding process, more, let's say, video chat for people to see each other, to talk to one another. So technology side, again, being the technology solution, it's not really a problem for us. It's more like an upside.
Okay. Okay, and also we spoke a bit about pandemic already, and my next question is also about that. There were some big changes in the recent 3 years, so could you please tell us a bit more about how everything changed recently within last few years?
You mean in the industry?
Okay. In the industry, of course.
Yeah. Well, it's not really about pandemic, I think, but it's more about the industry becoming more mature because it's still quite young, and the rules are being created as the industry goes. And I think the main change from my perspective is what started initially as very kind of a way to democratize investments. For regular people to be able to invest in companies directly, which wasn't really possible before, except public companies, right? Of course, you can somehow buy shares from Apple, but you can't invest in regular startup unless you are an angel investor or professional investor or VC fund or whatever. And now you go on a platform and you can choose some company you like, some startup, and then you put some money and get some shares. But with maturity of industry comes also the kind of more professional level in a way. So it means that not just regular people participate in those platforms, but also institutional investors. So they come there, they take certain kind of piece of the market, and particularly it is very kind of it can be seen quite a lot in what's called peer-to-peer lending, for example. Initially, this was an just a way to people to lend money to other people, or what the name suggests, peer-to-peer. But many platforms, they became basically banks, where there is a big institutional financial organization is behind the platform, and it gives like unlimited amount, well, not unlimited of course, but high level of funding. And what the platform does is it automates giving out loans to certain people, and so it's not peer-to-peer anymore. It's more like people still get money from financial institutions, but now via digital platform. So bottom line, I think what's changed in the industry is coming from more exciting process more professional investment business.
All right. Great. So moving forward, I think it's time to give you a short break because you were talking a lot. Let me tell you a bit more to you and to the audience listening to us right now about ShuftiPro and solution of ShuftiPro. So we are an AI-backed global ID verification service provider. AML, CFT compliance regulations for ICOs and funding platforms, especially for virtual currency, pose a risk and cause problem to businesses. So ShuftiPro has been working in a major capacity to provide global compliance solutions, especially adhering industries to KYC and AML compliance. So the role of an ID verification service cannot be stressed enough in this scenario. ShuftiPro provides an automated system with quick verification response. Time is the key to successful online token sale or fundraiser without having to compromise comprehensive identity verification. So here at ShuftiPro, we ensuring that the complete due diligence is done and providing the best user experience to the customers who are to be verified. Also wanted to ask you about the digitality, right? So we kind of spoke about this, but once again, is everything done digital? How has that impacted the crowdfunding as an industry in itself, and also how has Lenderkit reacted to the latest changes?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to what we discussed before. As the industry is like totally digital in a way. So I think the main impact is in how people actually communicate right now. When previously the first thing you would think of when you need to do due diligence or to meet somebody, you take some transport and go to places, and even with let's say, well, as I said, there are like very different types of crowdfunding, and there might be crowdfunding for real estate, for example. In that case, you need to go to the actual construction site, see the building, see some process, what's happening there. And now it's not so easy, at least during pandemic, because there are restrictions and so forth. So people have to find some other ways to do the same, but remotely, and obviously with help of digital technologies.
All right, all right, cool. Thank you, Konstantine. Maybe you are having some questions to me also.
Yeah, it would be helpful to hear some questions, some answers from you as well, not just from me. So I have a couple. What's interesting for me is because you work with customers in different industries, not just in crowdfunding, but in many others. How would you compare crowdfunding industry with other types of businesses, and if you see any particular challenges with crowdfunding?
Yeah, well, basically every industry has their very specific requirements or even their tailored demands, but Here at ShuftiPro, what we are doing, we are making sure that the solutions that we provide are very much tailored to the needs of the clients, and our services are very industry specific. So as far as the services are concerned, the demands of the crowdfunding industry, they are not very much different from any other industry that requires KYC and AML services for customer onboarding. So basically, the main idea here is to be as compliant as possible and be as tailored to the needs of each particular industry, I would say.
So once again, the same as for us, the customization or flexibility is the key.
Yeah, it is the key.
Okay. And another one I have is more geographical, because we see different demand for crowdfunding in different regions. Like I said, in Africa, Asia, Europe, UK, US, and so forth. How is it for you guys? Do you see any growing demand for KYC services or identity verification services, depending on the region? Like, are there any specific ones where you see the growth?
Okay, so basically the demand for automated KYC in crowdfunding industry or in any other industry has increased all over the world, like I would say globally, and it mostly, getting back to the topic of the coronavirus and corona crisis that, changed the game for many industries. So the pandemic has pushed the world to a digital forefront, which has led to the situation when the KYC and AML is required very, very much, and it touches the whole world. Of course, there are some particular regions that are now developing faster, like as you said about Africa and Asia, etc. Yeah, these are growing, but the KYC and AML procedures have been, very important in European countries, in the US, and lots of processes for KYC and AML started, to be automated some time ago, and now this process just becoming more and more of a usual practice, I would say. So yeah, it is a very global solution.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough.
Okay,
should we go to the questions from chat?
Yep, sure. Let me read some questions to you, and then we will decide whether this question is more related to your expertise or to mine, or both of us can add something. So The first question is, how quickly can I verify my investor, and what are some of the other verifications I can perform using a KYC service? Well, I think this is like more a question to me, right?
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Okay, so how quickly can you verify your investor? Well, that very much depends on what exactly would you like to verify, on the regulations, on the country. What we are doing in ShuftiPro in particular, our verification takes up to 1 minute to get the final result. And of course, there is some gap for you to make the final decision whether you trust this person, would you like to work with them. But in general, the technology that ShuftiPro provides takes up to 1 minute for the whole verification process. Okay, I hope I answered your question. If there are some more details needed, please write down in the chat section. Okay, with the changing KYC and AML regulations, do you think the regulatory authorities might have put these platforms under observation also? I think this is also a question to you, Konstantine.
I think it depends on how you read the question. If by these platforms the author means
I'm sure
KYC providers. Well, if it's about crowdfunding, then for sure, and they are already under observation, and regulatory authorities, they monitor the market constantly, and they also change their requirements in many ways depending on what's happening on the market. So, for example, in the UK, the regulator, which is called FCA, Financial Conduct Authority, they change what they do, they usually see some precedents, they see some cases when something went wrong, and they try to adjust their regulations, their rules accordingly. Sometimes they do it a little bit too much. It means that for platforms it becomes too hard to continue operate under those rules. So there is constant dialogue between businesses and regulator, and usually they come eventually to some compromise in a way. But if it's about whether KYC, AML solutions should be regulated, I guess it's more question to you. I don't know.
They are regulated, and they are very much regulated. They are regionally regulated, and each country in particular have some particular set of rules what is to be verified. So basically it is already under observation, and I'm sure it's not gonna change in any way in the nearest future. So my answer is pretty much very similar to yours. Moving to the next question, it's a very interesting question, and I would also be interested to hear your expertise on that. How far along is crypto to be used for crowdfunding?
It is an interesting question, and I think pretty much everyone who hears about cryptocurrencies, blockchain, wants to know like if it's a use case for crowdfunding or not. And we also ask this question to platforms because besides building crowdfunding platforms with our product, we also do certain market research, and we publish annual reports on this state of crowdfunding industry in certain way from our perspective, with a little bit tech angle rather than just overall market angle. And this year we've so how we do it, we send out a survey, ask some questions to the platforms, and then publish a report based on their answers. And one of the questions we asked this year was especially about blockchain, and we asked the platforms if they use blockchain currently, or if they are going to use it in the near future or something like that. And it turns out that within Europe, where we do the survey, only, I don't remember the exact number, but something like 3% of platforms already use blockchain, and the rest, some of them they are thinking about implementing it in the future. The rest are not. But the use cases, they are definitely there. You can accept crypto as a mean of payment. That's a very easy way. But also there are things like asset tokenization, for example, which allows you to basically digitize shares. So instead of getting shares in the form of written contracts and having a custodian for that, you can basically get digital representation of shares, which is coin in a way on a blockchain. We see that there is definitely interest for that. There are things like not ICO but initial security offerings happening, which are very similar to crowdfunding. So there is definitely space for blockchain in the future in the industry, but so far it's still the minority of platforms who actually use it in a meaningful way.
Okay, but you think there is some potential for cryptocurrencies in
the crowdfunding
industry? Okay, cool. Okay, moving forward, next question is, what if my investor denies KYC? Konstantine, have you ever faced these situations, and how is it handled in the industry?
I'm not totally sure like what denying KYC means. If they
going through the procedure, like if they don't want to go through KYC procedure.
Well, it's up to them if they want to sign up for the platform or not. And if KYC is a requirement, they will just not be accepted into the platform, I guess. Maybe in some cases there might be some exceptions, but I haven't heard about such cases, to be honest.
Yeah, me either.
I think if KYC is a part of regulations, especially, then platforms are just not allowed to ignore it.
Yeah, if it is regulated, of course there is like no room for exceptions mostly. Never heard about exceptions also. Okay, Kevin asks us, will KYC be performed at the initial interaction or during funding stage?
It really depends on a specific platform. Some platforms, they want to know everything from the very beginning. So the moment you click sign up, you fill in a lot of information about yourself, and also you go through full KYC procedure. So the platform knows for sure that you are the person you are pretending to be, in a way. And only after that, they will even disclose the details of their offerings or any kind of sensitive information to only verified users. Some other platforms which are, and I think that applies more to more social-oriented platforms or donation platforms, where the goal is to have as many interactions with platform as possible. They only collect basic details in the beginning, so they even allow you to sign up with Facebook, for example, as the first step. So you don't go through any actual KYC procedure. And only when you reach the stage where you put some money in and you want to invest into certain offering, at that stage they will do due diligence and they will do KYC procedure with you. So you don't have to be verified before in those cases.
So, but it depends on the platform. But does the geography matter in this regard, or it's only up to the platform itself, the flow?
I think it's both. So first of all, it's the platform business model might matter, and their strategy in a way, but also it could be that in some countries, depending on their regulations, it's just not allowed to disclose financial or sensitive information about the offering without verifying who you are disclosing it to.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. The next question is, do you provide credit debit card verification service? If yes, then is this enough? I think it's more to me, like this question. Yes, we do provide credit debit card verification. We have PCI DSS certification for that. To the question, is this enough? This very much depends on many factors. First of all, on the industry. Like we are talking mostly about crowdfunding, but I'm not sure if you, Catherine, asking about crowdfunding or in general KYC. Second of all, it depends on your risk appetites. What exactly would you like to know? On the regulators, on the geography of the person you are verifying. Well, what I'm offering, and to answer your question in more detail, you can see, by the way, on this slide, our contact details, where you can contact us, ask your additional questions, or describe the situation in a less generic way and more details, so we can give you more detailed expertise. But generally, yes, we do provide the card verification. If this is enough or not very much depends on what exactly you are trying to do and to be compliant with. And I hope this answers your question right now. Interesting question here. Being an investor, does KYC benefits me also? Konstantine, do you have an expertise on that?
Well, I definitely have an answer. I'm not sure if it's expertise or not. So I think the main benefit for an investor is allowed to do things on the platform. That's the main benefit of KYC. Of course, in some purely from user experience perspective, you don't want to go through additional steps. You want to do as little steps as possible, and then have an invest button, put your money in, and go. But, well, unfortunately, the world is not so easy in many cases, and if you go to a bank, they will also not open you an account without verifying something about you. And there is no good solution. On both sides of the spectrum, there are things. So if something is too easy, then it adds too much room for scams or for inappropriate usage of technology. If it's too complicated, then it just becomes too difficult to invest. And so always it's about finding balance between those two.
Yeah, I agree. And also a good part of all of that, I think the whole world moves towards the direction of transparency and honesty, and in this regard, being transparent and open, and if you explain, to the investor why KYC procedure is important, why does this have to happen, I think there is it's not such a big deal, after all, to go through plain AML check or quick KYC procedure.
Yeah, what I also want to add here is there is kind of an industry problem with that, which I hope might be solved at some point. The problem is that if you're only investing on one platform, let's say on Crowdcube, you go through this KYC process only once, and then you have your account verified, and then you can do multiple investments over time, and it's quite smooth. But if you want to diversify your portfolio as an investor, and you want to invest some amount on one platform, then some other amount on the other platform, or third platform, and so forth, you have to go through KYC over and over again on every platform, and it is very different on different platforms. So for an investor who wants to invest not millions, but I don't know, 100 euros on one platform, 100 euros on other platform, and so forth, it becomes too time consuming overall. Mm-hmm. What would potentially help, having some kind of unified system where you verify your details and go through KYC procedure once, and then you invest in multiple platforms. But the industry is not there yet.
Yeah. So you mean like creation of some, let's say, a database, right? For
yeah. So basically, like unified account, which mm-hmm. is accepted by multiple platforms.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's quite an idea. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a real problem for the industry, which potentially can be solved by someone.
Okay, cool. Another question. Is there any regulation that requires business verification of investors?
Yeah, I think, well, it's not really about regulation. It's more about business models, because at least what we call crowdfunding, it's a very wide term. So it's not just about retail investors where people invest into startups, for example. There might be quite different business models, and in some cases there will be institutional investors investing on the platform on behalf of the organizations. And in that case, it's no longer about KYC, it's more about KYB. So mm-hmm. it's verification of the business which invests into certain opportunities. So yes, in that case, and regulations, I guess, also require those verifications for business.
Yep. Business verification and AML check of a business entity, depending on the business model, can be important for crowdfunding industry. I also agree with that. Okay, that was the last question so far. Let's give a few more minutes for the audience to ask some additional questions if there are. Just reminding you that on the main screen there are our contact details. Also, the recording of the webinar will be sent to you guys, and the whole recording will be also published on our YouTube channel. So if there is something else, you can either watch a video again or contact us via our emails. See, no questions so far. So I think that's the moment for us to finish our discussion. Thank you very much, Konstantine, for very interesting discussion and the expertise you provided. It was very valuable.
Yeah, thank you very much for hosting the webinar, asking the questions, and I hope this was useful, not just for us, but for the audience.
For the audience too. Thank you, audience too, for listening to us, and hope to talk to you guys more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shufti Pro. True identity builds trust.